I ain't no cop. I ain't no lawyer. I watch Law and Order. You know what I'm saying? And the way this is going, it looks like a certain type of thing is going down. Chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer and clearer. But
for years, we thought we had the Vegas tragedy mapped out in our minds, the flashing lights of the Strip, the roaring BMW, the sudden gunfire that ended an era. But tonight, everything we thought we knew gets blown to pieces. Mopreme Shakur, Shakur's own brother, has come forward with a revelation that changes the entire game. He says the story we were told was a cover, a carefully arranged narrative designed to bury the real truth. According to him, Shakur may not just be a victim of that September night, he may still be alive, forced into hiding, and his enemy isn't some faceless rival. It's one of the most powerful men in hip-hop history. The name at the center of it all? Diddy.
The boy Puffy called me, though. Puffy called me back in the day. He called me, he was like, I just want you to know I ain't have nothing to do with your brother's,
We can feel the ground shifting because this isn't a random blogger recycling old theories. This is blood. This is family. Mopreme went on Piers Morgan's show and stared straight into the camera with the same calm intensity his brother once had. When pressed about Diddy's long-standing denials, Mopreme didn't mince words. He said he had his doubts, serious doubts, and reminded us of something chilling he told Diddy nearly 2 decades ago. The truth is still yet to come out, so we gonna see. Well, the years have passed, and now it feels like we are finally starting to see. If Shakur's own brother refuses to buy Diddy's innocence, then how much of what we were sold about that night holds up? We know Diddy called Mopreme back in 2008. That's not speculation, it happened. He reached out through radio host Big Boy, asking for a meeting. Imagine it, Diddy, the king of bad boy, rattled enough by whispers that he phoned the Shakur family himself. Surrounded by his crew, Mopreme listened as Diddy swore up and down that he had nothing to do with the shooting. But Mopreme didn't let him off the hook. He told him straight, the truth always comes out. Now here we are, 27 years later, and Mopreme admits it looks more and more like that statement from Diddy was not entirely honest. If the denials were airtight, why are cracks showing now? Why do we keep hearing the same rumors from insiders who lived in those rooms and walked those streets?
I mean, that's Puffy's homie. You know what I mean? They have a relationship. They're friendly. They know each other.
And this is where it turns darker. Mopreme's doubts are not floating alone. They're tethered to a history of whisper campaigns that stretch all the way back to 1996. Insiders in Los Angeles clubs spoke of Diddy having a cleanup squad, a quiet crew that stepped in after dangerous incidents. Witnesses who might have been able to speak suddenly went silent. Cases stalled. Files disappeared. Could that explain why investigations into Shakur's case seemed cursed for so long? Is this why, after nearly 3 decades, we only have one man, Keefe D, officially charged, while dozens of names that floated around the case never saw the inside of a courtroom? We have to ask, was somebody making sure the truth never reached daylight? Even law enforcement circles are whispering about the same thing. Federal documents reveal that in a secretly recorded police interview from years back, Diddy's name came up more than 40 times in connection with Shakur's hit. 40 times. Keefe D, the Southside Crip now awaiting trial, claimed Diddy put a bounty on Shakur and Suge Knight, millions of dollars for their heads, millions. He described a moment where Diddy allegedly told him, "I'll give anything for that dude head." If this was simply idle talk, why was it repeated, word for word, in so many different retellings? And why, decades later, do prosecutors still have that tape locked away in their files?
I think that they don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their...
Meanwhile, Diddy's empire is collapsing under the weight of scandal. Arrested for racketeering, facing trial for trafficking and coercion, his name is now tied not just to sordid parties, but to something much darker. And during the raids on his mansions, raids that pulled back the curtain on his private world, agents reportedly found files with the word Cuba stamped on them. That single word reignites the most persistent rumor of all, that Shakur staged his own exit and fled to the island, where his aunt Assata Shakur has lived in exile for decades. Fans have long circulated stories of Shakur's sightings in Havana side streets, grainy footage of a man with the same gait, the same shaved head, the same intensity. Were those files evidence of Diddy's role in keeping the real story buried? Was he not just a conspirator in the shooting, but also in controlling the myth of Shakur's disappearance? Let's not forget, Michael Nice, Shakur's former bodyguard, once swore he helped smuggle him out. He even claimed Castro himself sanctioned the exile. Nice said Shakur switched bodies at the hospital and slipped onto a jet bound for Barbados before reaching Cuba. The story was dismissed at the time as outrageous, until Nice suddenly wound up gone. just as he promised to release proof. So when federal raids, years later, dig up Cuban references inside Diddy's files, we can't help but wonder, was Nice telling the truth all along? And if so, why would Diddy have documentation that ties him to this?
I always said, Keisha, I'm not gonna live, past a certain time, or, I know I'm gonna get shot up. He knew that. That was, the one thing that he did know.
The unanswered questions pile higher. Why did no bystander see the shooter on one of the busiest nights in Vegas? Why was Shakur's weight and height listed incorrectly on the coroner's report? Why did the cremator retire immediately after working on his case? Why did Suge Knight later suggest Shakur was still alive, telling TMZ in 2014, why you think nobody been arrested cause Shakur not gone? Each detail alone is an oddity. Together, they form a map pointing toward deception. And now, with Mopreem's words echoing through the headlines, we have to ask, is the story finally ready to break open? Mopreem himself is careful, cautious, reminding us this is still unfolding. But even his restraint speaks volumes. If he were certain Diddy had no involvement, he'd say so. Instead, he points to the doubts, the lingering suspicions, and says, once more, we gonna see. For a man carrying the pain of his brother's loss for nearly 30 years, he doesn't waste words. He's saying what the rest of us are thinking. The time for lies is ending, and truth has claws. And the claws might just be coming for Diddy.
If that's part of the indictment, that's somewhat like a blackmail. He was blackmailing people to be in the freak-offs. So that's federal. That could be that's a federal charge. He can't blackmail people to say, yo, listen here, you did it once and you're gonna do it again. That ain't gonna make it with the government or nobody.
Meanwhile, prosecutors in Diddy's ongoing trial are already struggling with missing witnesses. One alleged victim, listed in indictments as Victim 3, has vanished, unreachable even by her lawyer. If this is how witnesses disappear in his current case, what might have happened back in 1996, when the stakes were even higher? Is this the modern echo of that so-called cleanup squad? Could the same tactics that silenced people around the Vegas shooting still be at play today, wrapped into the larger machinery of his empire? And that's where the Cuba theory refuses to go quietly. Every time new evidence surfaces, every time another insider speaks, Havana's shadow looms over the story. Was Diddy shielding knowledge that Shakur lived on, hidden away in a safe corner of the Caribbean? Did he profit in power and influence by ensuring the world believed Shakur was gone while he alone knew the truth? What could be so dangerous in those files that agents were combing through them during the raids?
Now, I ain't trying to say that's some kind of conspiracy, and maybe some other shit was going on, or this, that, and the third. But brother, he had that conversation with K. Slade 2 weeks before he was murdered.
Behind the glittering awards, platinum plaques, and celebration-soaked after-parties, Bad Boy Records is beginning to look less like a music label and more like a criminal syndicate draped in silk. The stories pouring out now are darker than anything hip-hop's East versus West rivalry ever put on wax. We're talking about accusations of exploitation on a scale that turns the studio lights into interrogation lamps. Those infamous freak-off gatherings described by prosecutors weren't just wild nights, they were staged marathons of control, with Diddy allegedly forcing people into degrading encounters, filming them, and then holding the tapes like weapons. And when we add in the human trafficking charges, the racketeering counts, and the whispers of silenced witnesses, the image of Diddy as a charismatic mogul starts to morph into something closer to a kingpin running a secret society. Think about it. Bad Boy wasn't just dropping radio hits, it was a machine, a fortress of loyalty enforced by fear. Former associates have described a world where saying no to Diddy wasn't an option, where favors turned into debts, and debts could get ugly. If this same machinery was in motion back in 1996, then it's not far-fetched to imagine how the aftermath of Shakur's shooting could be controlled, massaged, or buried altogether. Witnesses vanish, files go missing, and those who try to speak up either retract their statements or never surface again. Is it any wonder the Vegas investigation seemed cursed from day one? Now, with federal agents combing through every corner of his empire, it feels like all the skeletons in Bad Boy's closets are finally rattling out.
These 3 law firms on retainer. I don't know how much money is coming in, but I know that a lot of money is going out every single month for Diddy.
The most tantalizing skeleton may be the so-called Cuba files, a phrase that slipped out of raid inventories like a spark into a room full of gasoline. Federal agents cataloged boxes of documents and digital storage devices during their sweep of Diddy's estates, and among them was this cryptic label. We don't know what lies inside, but the speculation has already spiraled into feverish territory. Could these files contain encrypted communications that trace back to the 90s? Records of hushed payments, or even first-hand proof that Shakur slipped into exile rather than a coffin? The very idea electrifies conspiracy watchers because it ties into decades of alleged sightings in Havana. Locals in Old Havana have long claimed to have seen a man with Shakur's build moving quietly through the streets. ducking into side alleys or cafes before vanishing again. If Diddy kept a private cache of notes, images, or recordings referencing those sightings, it would suggest not only awareness, but active involvement in maintaining the illusion. The Cuba files may not just be a label, they could be the connective tissue between rumor and reality.
Oh, but I'm still a little suspicious about the timing and how it's all rolled out here.
What makes this discovery even more chilling is the timing. These files surfaced during a raid that was supposed to target trafficking and coercion, not unsolved shootings from nearly 30 years ago. That overlap raises the possibility that Diddy's alleged double life as mogul and shadow boss bled across decades, with one crime shielding another. If investigators open those files and find anything tying him to communications with Cuban intermediaries, it would be nothing short of explosive. The raid, meant to crack open his modern empire, could accidentally unravel hip-hop's oldest mystery. But here's where the psychological twist cuts deepest. If the Cuba files exist in detail, then it's not just Diddy in the spotlight anymore. The logistics of moving and protecting a figure as famous as Shakur would have required layers of cooperation. Political allies, financial backers, perhaps even international intelligence players who saw value in keeping him alive, but hidden. That kind of network can't survive for decades without silence at the very top. Which begs the question, how many powerful names have been complicit in this cover-up? And how far would they go to keep it buried?
And though they laid the blueprint for me, and they're not here anymore. So I always want to make sure that, through me, through all of us, that
For the Shakur family, the existence of such files would be more than an answer. It would be a wound torn open. Proof of survival after all these years would mean proof of betrayal, too. It would mean that while millions mourned and hip-hop built its mythos around a lost king, select insiders profited from the deception, controlling narratives, royalties, and legacies. The weight of that revelation could crush reputations across the industry, not just Diddy's. And that may be why the whispers surrounding the Cuba files carry such a sense of danger. We stand on the edge of something unprecedented. If these documents are ever made public, they could validate decades of suspicion and confirm that the story of Shakur isn't finished at all. Or they could expose something even darker, that his fate was sealed not just by a gun on the Vegas Strip, but by an unholy alliance of moguls, politicians, and opportunists who saw his disappearance as useful. Either way, the Cuba files promise that the truth, whatever form it takes, will be more shocking than anyone has dared to imagine.
PD named Diddy 77 times in court documents related to Tupac.
And then there's Suge Knight. Love him or hate him, Suge is the one man who has seen both sides of this bloody feud up close. He was behind the wheel the night Shakur was struck, he lived through the chaos, and he built his own empire with its own shadows. Now he sits behind bars on an unrelated conviction, stripped of power, his legacy hanging by a thread. What does a man in his position have left? Revenge, redemption, a chance to finally control the narrative one last time. Suge has teased the possibility for years, dropping comments like landmines. In a 2014 interview, he said flat out that Shakur wasn't gone. Why you think nobody been arrested? He asked, hinting that the authorities knew more than they let on. If Mopreme is firing the opening shots now, Suge might just have the ammunition to blow the case wide open. Imagine Suge testifying, laying out in detail what really went down on the Strip that night, or even confirming that Shakur staged his exit. He would have every incentive to point the finger directly at Diddy, painting his rival as the architect of a decades-long deception. Could he have documents, hidden tapes, first-hand knowledge that the rest of us only dare speculate about? It's possible, and if so, the fallout would be nuclear. Suge has nothing to lose except the chance to be remembered as the man who brought the truth to light.
Not surprised. We all know who he is and how he get down, so that don't surprise me.
All of this converges on one terrifying possibility. What if the accusations are true? If federal prosecutors prove that Diddy wasn't just running shady parties but a full-blown criminal enterprise, then every part of his past becomes fair game for re-examination. The bounty claims, the secret files, the whispered connections to Shakur's disappearance. They could all be dragged into the courtroom spotlight, and if investigators stumble across even a shred of evidence that connects his empire to Shakur's fate, then hip-hop history will be rewritten in real time. The world wouldn't just be watching a mogul fall, we'd be watching one of the music industry's most powerful figures exposed as the man who may have tried to erase its brightest star. Picture it. Headlines screaming that Shakur was alive, that he fled to Cuba under threat from the very man who now faces life in prison. The shockwaves wouldn't just shake the industry, they'd shatter trust in everything we thought we knew about the golden age of rap. Every interview, every denial, every awards show moment featuring Diddy would be rewatched with suspicion. And the question that would haunt all of us is chillingly simple. How far was he willing to go to silence the truth?
It sort of seems like you know, they're trying to minimalize it to just gang shit.
So we're left dangling on the edge of a revelation. If Moprim's words were the opening crack, if Suge still holds the dynamite, and if federal prosecutors keep pulling thread after thread, we may finally watch the entire tapestry unravel. If Shakur is alive, and if Diddy orchestrated a deception to keep it buried, this scandal could topple the last illusions of hip-hop's so-called untouchable royalty. What do you believe? Was Shakur truly lost on the Vegas Strip? Or has he been living in exile all these years while Diddy built an empire on his disappearance? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this mystery may finally be unraveling before our eyes. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep you try to bury it.